Please welcome everybody, Annie, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, you are so welcome. And just before we get started, I've got some slides I'm going to share for everybody as we dive into all this learning. But today, what we're talking about is we're talking about the leadership gaps that nobody is talking about. And specifically for us as women, right? You might have read leadership books, you might have been to leadership seminars, but what I've found is that a lot of the information out there is pretty superficial. Unless you want to read 100 leadership books and really start diving deep into that content, which none of us have time to do. Today, we're going to do the fast track towards getting everybody at a higher level of their own leadership, because ultimately, leadership is the number one thing that takes you to the next level of your life, and it unlocks different parts of your talents, different parts of your gifts, and different parts of your voice. So I thought that would be a really great topic to cover today. So let me just share my slides if that's okay. And then we're going to dive into some of this learning. And I'm going to save some time at the end so that we can ask and answer some questions, because the questions are always some of the best parts. So let's just get this up and ready to rock, and then we will get moving. So the three leadership gaps that nobody talks about, and just so everybody knows, the reason why we're doing two different sessions is that we're going to talk about one of the leadership gaps today and do a deep dive into that. And then we're going to dive into the two other leadership gaps on the December 17th call so that we can have a very profound learning experience together. Because as women, if we're learning and we're winning, then we're growing. And things that are absolutely beautiful come about when we learn and grow internally. So we're just going to dive right in, ladies, if that sounds good. Okay, so we're going to start with a bit of a story. I want to picture for a moment, I want everyone to picture at the end of a long day, you drive home, you drive into your garage, you're sitting in your garage, and you're having a moment. How many of us have had that moment when we get home at the end of a long day and we have to sort of pep ourselves up before we walk into the door, because we don't know what we're going to be walking into? We don't know if there's going to be chaos. We don't know if there's going to be fighting with our kids. We don't know how our spouse is going to be, or significant other. I remember there was one day about 8 years ago where I drove into my garage and I sat in the garage, much like the lady here in this picture. And I literally thought to myself, I don't know how I'm going to go into my house, because I know there's going to be chaos. I know there's going to be some level of destruction. I had two little toddlers at the time. I had a spouse that I was working with. We were working 18, 20-hour days. I had never felt so alone and frustrated in my life. And so I sat in that car because I was trying to avoid my family. I was trying to avoid going into any level of conflict. And I had to do one last call of the day. And that last call of the day, I was actually calling a leadership coach to see if she would work with my husband, my ex-husband now, on his neuroplasticity, which is the way the brain learns. And I remember sitting in that car and I was like, gosh, if I could just find one more thing to make it better for him, because he was sort of a little bit of an Eeyore. He was always sort of down and depressed. And I was always trying to pull us forward and make things work in business. And I remember turning to her on that call and I'm just like, what can we do to fix him? How do we make him better? And she turned it around on me and she was like, why aren't you hiring me for you? Why are you trying to hire me for him? And why isn't he on the call if he's wanting to do this work? And what she said next really hit me deep in my gut. She's like, why don't you think that you should be investing in yourself if you've been running companies for 15 years? That hit me pretty hard, but so I pushed back a little bit. I'm like, well, it's not really about me. This is really about him. And she's like, you are wrong. This is 100% about you. And then I got really scared. I remember pausing for a second and I'm like, I've spent so much money trying to make this man better. Am I worth that same amount of money? Can I spend this amount of money on myself? Because I had put this other person on a pedestal in my life. And I had thought, I have to be able to help. I have to make him better. But not once did I have the thought, well, what about me? I was running three businesses. I had two little kids. I was running the household. I was keeping a marriage together. And not once did I think that I was worth that same level of investment. So I realized in that moment, I'm like, the life as an entrepreneur, which I think is what every person hopefully on this call is experiencing, right? As we dive into investing in new things in our lives and into real estate investment, we may never feel like we're in balance. We may never feel like we're winning. We might feel like we're always teeter-tottering on all of these different aspects of our lives that we're trying to figure out. And when that coach got to me, I had one of those moments. It was honestly like an oh shit moment when I realized there is a gap here that I am not seeing. And if I'm not seeing it, I'm the one who's actively coaching hundreds and thousands of entrepreneurs on identifying their own blind spots, but I don't know mine. How can I possibly step into that next level of investment into myself? So when that happened, I realized we all need to do work to uncover these limiting blocks, these limiting concepts that we cannot see. How many of us have ever gone to look at a new vehicle, and on the way to look at the new vehicle, we've thought about it, and we're like, oh, I should really get that FJ Cruiser. And then we get to the vehicle place, we look at all the FJs there, the cruiser car, and we get out on the road, and suddenly everybody has an FJ Cruiser. And you're like, I never even saw this car once on the drive into the dealership, right? We've all had that moment because our brains will only allow us to see what we are consciously aware of. So that's why we're going to dive into this topic today of the leadership gaps nobody sees, because I couldn't even see the gap back when I started doing this work. And if we can't see our own gap, how can we grow and evolve into the best version of ourselves? Very difficult to do. Now, I want to show you some pictures here just for a moment. Here's a picture of me with my ex-husband back when I used to be in that phase of being scattered and nervous and worried and anxious and living in a space where I couldn't see my own blind spots. The picture on the right is me after I went through all this learning and I developed and I grew over the past 6 years. You can see the pure joy that is in me because I have done the work. And I used to think to myself, why does he always get to win? I had to flip that around and say, when is it time for me as a woman to step into my power and start to win? And that all starts with investing in yourselves. So this is what I believe. I believe that every purpose-driven entrepreneur deserves to live a passionate, connected life, exceeding her goals and living on her own terms. Now, I love the fact that we're on a call with all the she women because let's be honest, real estate allows you to do that, right? It allows you to live life on your own terms, which is so incredibly beautiful. But let's dive into some of this work that we're going to do on our brains today, because I want everyone to leave this call knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt that something that might have held you back is no longer going to impact you in the same way. So today we're going to talk about the first of the three leadership gaps. And I'll tell you what the three leadership gaps are so you have an idea as to where we're going to go on the next call. We're going to start with the leadership gap today that is the imposter syndrome gap. Almost everybody that I've ever met who's a woman, even though we're incredible high performers, every single one of us gets into a moment where we think, should I really be here? Should I really be doing this? Can I really stand in my power? Can I really contribute in this way? Am I really the expert? So we're going to cover the imposter syndrome concept and how to solve it. Then after that, on the next call, on the December 17th call, we're going to dive into what is the second gap, which is identifying your core trauma pattern. Because if you don't know what your core trauma pattern is, you are going to repeat it over and over again for the rest of your life, and it's going to block what you're able to see and the opportunities that are going to be able to come to you. Then we're going to look at the third leadership gap, which is around having a hijacked nervous system. Most of us, because we've gone through really difficult things in our lives over many years, our nervous system is jacked way up, and that causes us to not make decisions from a calm and neutral place. So if you've ever come home at the end of a long day, you want to sit on your bed for like 5 minutes and just relax, but you can't because your brain is spinning like crazy, that's an example of a hijacked nervous system. So we're going to dive into each one of these topics, and I'm going to give you practical, actionable, very easy tools to use to take you from reactive to neutral, from anxious to confident, and from being in a little bit of that imposter syndrome to being much more excited about the future that you're going to create. So I hope, ladies, you're ready, because here we go. Leadership gap number one, imposter syndrome. All right, this is something that's really surprising to me. I literally started doing some research before I got on this call to see, okay, what are people talking about when it comes to imposter syndrome? I heard that there are 3 ways to solve this. Number one, be in more gratitude. Number two, talk to a therapist. And number three, which we'll get into in just 1 second, was share your feelings and stop comparing yourself. Now, when I heard that, I was like, how do you tell someone that gratitude and talking to a therapist and sharing your feelings is going to solve this? How many of you ladies on the call have heard people say that in the past and be like, great, that does nothing for me? All of us. So today we're going to do it a little bit differently, but first we have to talk about what imposter syndrome is, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So if you've ever doubted your accomplishments, if you've ever walked into a meeting where you're supposed to be presenting and you get anxious or depressed in your profession because you're like, what if I'm not really as good as everybody wants me to be? What if I don't show up the way that everyone's expecting? Or if you ever have any negative self-talk that shows up in your mind, these are all indicators that you might be experiencing some of this. So as women, we are all high achievers. We all work like crazy to achieve in life, but we somehow also sabotage this beautiful success because we have self-doubt. We set these extremely challenging goals that sometimes we can't hit. And then more often than not, we don't attribute our success to internal factors. We attribute it to external factors. And so when this happens, we can be in the realm of imposter syndrome. So, like I just said, when I was researching this, all I could find to solve this problem that we all experience are these four things. And these four things don't work. Gratitude's great. You can write in your gratitude journal, but it's not going to change the game. Let's dive into what actually changes the game for us. So I've got four things here we're going to dive deep into. We're going to do some exercises right here on the call together because I cannot imagine leaving this call and not giving you practical skills. So here we go. Here are the four top things that actually change and get you out of imposter syndrome into a much more confident space for everything you want to do in your life. And I'm going to break each one of these things down. Number one, I'm sure everyone here has heard something about talking to your inner child. How many of us ladies have heard that we should be doing more of that? Okay. How many of us do that consistently? Not many of us, right? Because most of us don't know what to say. We're like, what am I supposed to say to her? How am I supposed to interact with her? What should I bring up? So I'm going to give you a specific exercise that allows you to deeply connect. And it takes your subconscious brain, which is about 11 million data points a second, and your conscious brain, which is only 40 data points. And it brings both parts of your brain together so you can work from a place of harmony. And if you feel more harmonious, you're obviously more neutral, more calm, and you're less reactive. And that means you're typically more confident in your words and your actions and your thoughts. So we're going to talk to the inner child. Then we're going to talk about creating a reality document. This is one of the things that all the entrepreneurs I work with talk about. And they're like, I never even thought about creating a document that was my personal reality that I could reference every time I start to get nervous that I don't have the right background or I don't have the right words or I don't have the right speech. So we'll dive into that and we'll all do that as an exercise. Then we have to talk a little bit about when you say stop comparing, it's sort of helpful, but it's also not. What we have to do instead is we have to understand what is more important. Is it more important to look at what we have gained in our lifetime, or is it more important to look at the gap between where we are now and where we want to go? The gap will never allow you to feel confident. The gain, when you compare yourself to who you were 5 years before, is the game changer. And lastly, as women, we have to redefine success. It can't be a definition that anybody else has for us. We have to have our own definition. So if you do these four things, imposter syndrome will start to slip away and you'll have a practical tool to use anytime it shows up so we can interrupt those patterns. So is this all making sense so far, ladies? I'm not able to see the chat, so I'm hoping that everyone's tracking. We're getting excited about learning. So here we go. First things first. If we're going to talk to our inner child, the main reason that we do this is that we want the subconscious brain that processes 11 million data points a second to be working together with our conscious brain, which only processes 40 data points a second. Now, more often than not, 97% of all of our thoughts come from our subconscious that's running 11 million data points every second. And that subconscious brain started back when we were very, very young, between the ages of 7 and 10, when we decided something was true about us. And we lived in that story for the rest of our life, whether we know it or we don't. So when we get upset, we get triggered, we have negative self-talk, we create anxiety inside of ourselves. That's because that little 7-year-old is having a freak out moment because she's like, how am I going to handle this? How can I possibly do this? I'm not an adult. I don't know what to do. So if we talk to the 7-year-old and we let her know, I am the adult now and I have more knowledge and I can make sure you're taken care of, it changes the game. So I want us all to have this experience of what it's like to talk to our 7-year-old in a really beautiful way. So for every woman on this call, what I want you to do is I want you to take a quick moment and we're going to do this exercise together. So I want you to close your eyes and you're going to put your right hand on your heart, your left hand on your stomach. And we're going to notice first before we begin, where is there tension in your body? Some of you might feel tension in your neck or your shoulders or your chest, might feel like you have a little bit of tightness because you've been going all day. Just take a moment to feel where that tension is. And we're going to watch how that tension changes as we go through this exercise. So I'm asking that you trust me a little bit here. I'm going to have everybody close your eyes. I'm going to have you repeat out loud after me, and we're going to run through this a couple of times. So notice the tension, notice where it lives in your body, and I want you to repeat out loud after me. Hi, I'm listening. Thank you for sharing this emotion with me. Thank you for bringing this emotion to my attention. I will always have your back. I will always be here for you. I will never leave you. All of your thoughts are important to me. All of your emotions are good. You are enough for me. You are mine and I am yours. I love you. Please forgive me. I am sorry. Thank you. Would it be okay if we are a team? Would it be okay if we do life together? Hi, I'm listening. Thank you for sharing this with me. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I will always have your back. I will always be here for you. You are enough for me. You are mine and I am yours. I love you. Please forgive me. I am sorry. Thank you. Would it be okay if we are a team? Would it be okay if we do life together? And I want you all to sit with your eyes closed for a moment and notice how the tension in your body has eased. Notice how you feel maybe a little bit lighter, a little bit more calm, maybe a little bit more warm and comforted. Notice that there is a difference between how you feel now and how you felt 2 minutes ago, because you are more integrated and that little girl inside of you has decided that she gets to come home and be safe. This is the beginning of a practice that will dramatically change your world, because you are also, at the same time, as you sync up your subconscious with your conscious mind, your little girl with your adult self, you're also syncing up your head with your heart. And if you can feel it, you're now in this cozy space of being in your heart, knowing that there is safety there. And if we can do this before we speak, if we can do this practice before we walk into a room of new people, you will feel extremely differently walking into that room. You will feel more connected to who you are at your core, and it will give you that added confidence to be truly and authentically you in any environment you walk into. So now I want you to take a moment, enjoy this feeling. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. And I would love to hear in the chat if you can share what you just experienced. What did you notice was the difference from before in the tension in your body to the difference now? How would you describe this new feeling of being a little bit more connected? So this is part one. If we want to solve our feelings of anxiety or negative self-talk, we have to build a very beautiful relationship with that little girl. And she has to know that we love her and we see her and we're there for her, and that she doesn't have to make all the decisions, and that we have more knowledge than she does to make sure she's taken care of. So ladies, please post in the chat so we can hear what you thought of this exercise. We can hear what you felt, what you experienced. We've got part one under wraps. Now we're going to jump to the next part of this learning, because this is something that you stack. You stack the first moment of talking to that little girl on top of this next piece. So the next piece is we have to create a reality document. A reality document is something that I came up with many years ago when I started coaching, because I had so many people fall into imposter syndrome. The reality document is where you list all of your accomplishments, everything that you've ever accomplished from the time you left high school until the moment right now that you're sitting in front of me. You list every single accomplishment. You list all of your successes. You list the amount of money that you have in your bank account so that you know that you have money there. And you list all the people who you love and who love you. This reality document becomes something that you use to interrupt the pattern of thinking you are not enough, or thinking that you don't have any expertise or believing that you shouldn't be somewhere. You only believe those things because that 7-year-old isn't connected. And once you have a reality document, which you can interrupt that pattern, you can read and look at and be like, oh my gosh, look at all the things that I've created. Look at all that I have done. Look at all this beauty that I've brought to the world. Now, many people will fight me on this and they won't create the document, and then the imposter will come back up again, or the little 7-year-old will be triggered. I'm like, well, let's create that document together. And once they see the document, they can see all the success they've had, all the amazing things they've done in their life. And I'm talking about identifying every little thing that you have ever done that has been an accomplishment. It changes the way your subconscious connects with your conscious mind. So if you can tell, there's a theme here, ladies, right? We are trying actively at all times to take our subconscious mind that's actively trying to keep us safe, but also slightly making us miserable, and our conscious mind that wants to be focused on growth and amazing experiences and standing in our power, and we're bringing them back together so they can harmonize. So how many of you ladies think you could create a reality document? Seems pretty easy, right? This isn't rocket science, but it is something that helps rewire the neural pathways in our brain. So every time we start questioning ourselves, we pull up this reality document, we read it through, and we're like, wow, I'm sort of a badass. I guess I should remember that. I guess I should feel what it feels like to be this person that is showing up on paper. So that's why we create the reality document. And the key here is to practice it, review it every time you have that little 7-year-old flare up, or that imposter feeling flare up, or that negative self-talk flare up. Read it out loud with emotion. So if you want, take a moment here just to write down your top 3 accomplishments, top 3 things that when you think on them, you're like, wow, I can't believe I did those things. I started a restaurant when I was 25 years old with $2.5 million from 4 gentlemen that wanted me to start a restaurant, and I built it out in 7 months. I rarely think about that moment, but when I made my reality document, I was like, oh my God, what other 25-year-old gets to do that? Right? So this is where we get to celebrate all the amazing parts of who you are and put it on a document so it's real, instead of just being something that's floating around in your head that you can very quickly devalue. Does that make sense? Awesome. All right. So we've got our reality document. We've got talking to our 7-year-old. What is next? The next thing is we have to look at the gain in our lives versus the gap. So almost every woman and every man that I've ever worked with who falls into imposter syndrome, they're always in the past or in the future. They're either in the past thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't done enough. I should be moving so much faster. I should be at a different place right now. Or they're in the future being like, I really thought by this time of my life I would have had all these things, and I don't have any of them. What they're missing is we're not in the present moment. And if you're in the present moment, you can look at, okay, where was I 5 years ago? Have I improved? Have I learned new lessons? Have I had beautiful experiences over the last 5 years? So this is a little bit different than the reality document, because the reality document is very specific on here's a list of the accomplishments and successes. This is just a comparison of you in your own mind to how you were 5 years ago. Now, how many of us on this call have had tremendous growth over the past 5 years? Growth that literally, when you look back on it, you're like, I don't even know how I made it through some of those experiences. I don't even know how I maintained sanity through those experiences. But guess what, ladies? We are all badasses. We are all powerhouses. We have made it through some incredible things in our lives. So why not focus on the change and the growth that has happened over the last 5 years every time we get stuck? So if we have a reality document that tells us how amazing we are in every aspect of our life, and then we have the way to reframe it in our minds, well, how was I 5 years ago? Have I improved from 5 years ago? And we know what the 5 year ago us looked like, and how we look now, and how we think now, and how we act now, and the people we surround ourselves with now. We are living in the present and celebrating how incredible each one of us is. So hopefully you're starting to see that there's a theme here, that when we're an imposter, we're not celebrating ourselves. We're not identifying internally with how great we are. So every one of these pieces builds upon each other to allow us to realize and remember the greatness that is in every single one of us. So this is the gain versus the gap. The last part of this, I think, is the most exciting. So how many of us in our entire lives have thought, well, success is only when I get to the next big opportunity, when I get to that next big target or that next big goal? How many of us have thought about success being a target, a goal, an opportunity? Almost all of us, right? Because we're built from the time we're built in condition from the time we're in college and in high school. We raise our hands when questions are asked. We're used to responding and planning to get somewhere. But the second we get to that goal, the feeling is very fleeting. We're very quickly on to the very next goal, as quickly as we can get to that next goal. So it's not shocking that we don't feel a lot of fulfillment and contentment when we get to these big goals. But if you're in imposter syndrome, it's because you're not feeling the goals that you're achieving. So how do we change that? We have to do this mentally and emotionally. We have to look at success and we have to redefine it in a new way. For me, success has always been a feeling. And if success is a feeling, I can feel what success is at any point of the day as long as I redefine it. So the way I redefined it a few years ago was that success for me is an optimized daily experience that I sustain over time. So for example, I think about my ideal day and I think to myself, if I have the ideal day, what does that feel like for me? Well, it might feel like I wake up and I feel rested. I might go from feeling rested to having snuggles with my kids. I might go from feeling like I'm loved on by my kids to having a delicious breakfast. From there, I might decide I'm going to jump on some calls with some clients and change their lives forever, right? That's going to make me feel content and fulfilled. I go after how do I create that feeling of my ideal day and how do I spread it out over time consistently? Not many of us start our careers thinking about what do we want our ideal day to feel like? Do we? No. Most of us get very caught in the loop of how am I going to make money? How am I going to invest more? How am I going to make sure that I take care of myself? How am I going to get my needs met? So instead, if we make success a feeling and we allow ourselves to redefine it and think, okay, what would my optimized day look like? What do I want it to feel like? What do I need to give to myself to feel good all day? It changes how we feel success. And we feel success much faster when we do something that makes ourselves feel good. So what a lot of my clients laugh at about me is they're like, okay, so how do you optimize your day? You have all these calls back to back with all these people you're helping. How do you do it? When I tell them is, I'm like, well, I really love big musicals. All the stuff you'll see on Broadway. I love all that big show tune stuff. I don't know how to tap dance, but I bought myself tap dancing shoes and I tap danced around my kitchen playing huge musical soundtracks in between my calls because it makes me so happy. Now, that for me is a feeling that I absolutely love. And so, am I successful in that moment? Yes. Am I successful on the call right before I take that moment to dance around my kitchen? Yes, because I'm so excited to be with the person and then I'm so excited to go dance. So, I felt like as long as I can create a sustainable feeling of that feeling of good, then I am successful every single day because I'm satisfied with what I'm contributing and how I'm acting in my world. Doesn't mean I don't get a lot of work done. For most of you who know me, I'm a very hard worker, but I go after the feeling because the feeling is what motivates us and moves us in life. So, how does this sound, ladies? Is it a weird thing to contemplate to be like, well, what do I want my ideal day to be like? What would make me feel like I'm in excellence? Because we're always taking care of everybody else, making sure everyone else is in excellence, making sure everybody else has a great day. What about our ideal and great day? So, can we see how when we stack talking to our 7-year-old, creating a reality document that we can reference to interrupt any negative pattern, looking at what we've gained over the last 5 years to validate who we are in the role that we're currently playing, and then we redefine how we see and feel success? It's a totally different way of living our lives. And in those moments, negative self talk does not take over in our mind. We don't loop on things. We don't question, are we the expert or are we not? We know to the core of our being, this is who I am. And this is the power of being authentically me.